LGBT. 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 Hey y'all, my name is Evelyn. Welcome back to my channel, Here There Be Magic, where we showcase the magic of storytelling. And happy Pride Month! It's nearly over. My bad, I really meant to get this video up earlier in the month so that I could maybe do a little bit more Pride content, but I'm taking 2 classes online this summer and things just got away from me. But I, without fail, managed to do at least 1 Pride themed video a year, and I tried to make it this one. This is the Pride flag book tag. Take 4 for me. This is a tag that was originated by booktuber Common Spence, and the questions are all inspired by colors on the rainbow pride flag and the meanings behind those colors. I did this tag the very first year that I started my channel, and I've done it every June since. And every year I challenge myself to do all new books, all new authors. I'm always trying to diversify my reading, and this year I think I accidentally made them all sapphic. Alright, let's get started with red, representing life. Pick a book with a spirited protagonist totally proud of who they are, someone who gives you life. Previously, I've recommended Queens of Geek by Jen Wilde, Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy, and The Diviners by Libba Bray. This year, I'm recommending I'll Be the One by Lila Lee. Sky Shin knows that as a fat girl, people think she shouldn't draw attention to herself. People like her mother, who is constantly telling her what fat girls can't or shouldn't do. Things like dancing, or wearing bright colors, or auditioning for a televised K-pop competition. Sky hasn't let that negativity crush her dreams. In fact, she's actively chasing them down by entering a nationally televised K-pop competition. She knows she has the talent to win, but she'll have to fight through fatphobic beauty standards and intense media scrutiny in order to prove that to the world. So, this book falls under the LGBT+ umbrella because both Sky and her love interest Henry are bisexual. They actually have some very interesting, deep and meaningful conversations about their bisexuality and what that means, especially in conjunction with their Korean culture. And in such a strictly heteronormative environment as, you know, television and also K-pop. Sky is like a freaking Energizer bunny of positivity, and that's not to say she doesn't ever feel the pressure that is being placed on her by her mother and the media's expectations and even one of the judges of the show, but she always finds the strength to push back against that negativity, and so the story as a whole is just so fluffy and adorable and romantic and hopeful. Overall, just very hopeful. I came away with a huge smile on my face, and I think you might too. Next we have orange, representing healing. Pick a book that made you find a deeper meaning or catharsis in your life. Previously, I've recommended The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater, Don't Date Rosa Santos by Nina Moreno, and The Deck of Omens by Christine Lynn Herman. This year, I'm recommending Fire with Fire by Destiny Soraya. This book follows 2 sisters, Dani and Eden Rivera, who were born into a family of dragon slayers. To Eden, their family's duty means everything, and training is basically her entire life. She can't understand how Dani, who's frustratingly more naturally talented than her, could prioritize having a normal life over keeping the world safe from these dangerous creatures. When Dani comes face to face with a dragon named Nox, forging an unbreakable magical bond between their consciousnesses, she realizes that there's more to the conflict between humans and dragons than she's ever been told. Meanwhile, desperate to save her sister from the dragon she assumes is corrupting her mind, Eden turns to a group of mysterious sorcerers promising an alluring power. So this book falls under the LGBT+ spectrum because Dani is bisexual. The world is very similar to ours, except there are sorcerers and dragons lurking around. Because of that, it's one of the few fantasy books that I've read where the character actively identifies as bi, uses a label that people in our world also use to describe themselves. And there's something about reading a character who shares that identity in my favorite genre, with my favorite magical creature even. I love dragons. That was so amazing. And as much as Dani and her dragon Nox have my entire heart, they're not actually the first thing that I thought of when I thought of this book for this prompt. That's actually Eden's story. Despite being an incredibly determined and well-trained dragon slayer, Eden suffers from anxiety that can sometimes cause her to overthink things and freeze up. Because of this, her family has treated her with an unfair amount of caution, especially compared to Dani, who will just like leap headfirst into situations. At least that's how Eden sees things, and it's caused her to become very fixated on trying to prove herself, to the point where she gets trapped in these negative thought spirals about herself, blaming herself for her own anxiety and not being strong enough to overcome it. As someone with generalized anxiety disorder, there were many parts of Eden's characterization, specifically when it came to her anxiety, that I resonated with very deeply. I've often become frustrated at myself in situations where my anxiety symptoms are heightened for seemingly no reason. Like when I'm trying to order at a restaurant and suddenly making a choice becomes impossibly overwhelming, or I'm in Spanish class and I know the answer but the mere thought of saying the wrong thing out loud just steals my voice away. Of course, there are bigger examples and smaller examples, but no matter the situation, there's always this little voice lurking in my brain right beneath the big one that's shouting danger that is upset at me for not acting normally. Like, a normal person would have no problem completing X, Y, or Z simple task. Often that translates into me wishing that my brain were wired differently or easier, and feeling just bad about myself and my anxiety, which is something that I have little to no control over. Control, that's the key word there. I cannot ever control my anxiety because it's just the way that my brain is hardwired. However, I can cope with my anxiety. I can find strategies to combat my anxiety that really work for me. And I'm actively aware of this, but that doesn't mean that that anxiety voice in my brain is or likes to acknowledge that fact. So as I'm reading Dani's story, I just want to shout at her, like, anxiety isn't inherently a bad thing. Like, sure, my anxiety reaches some pretty unhealthy levels sometimes, but that natural fear is built into everyone's brains for a reason. It's part of what makes us such good survivors. And when I'm not catastrophizing, I'm pretty proud of my ability to think my way through a situation on a very meticulous level. Reading this book really helped reaffirm that idea that fear helps keep us safe and is connected to our ability to feel other emotions like love. I'm being very vague here, obviously, to avoid spoilers, but suffice it to say, my thoughts about Dani and the way that I wish she were treating herself made me realize that I could be treating myself better when it comes to the way that I think about my anxiety. Next up we have Yellow, which represents sunshine. Pick a book that could brighten even your darkest day. Previously, I've recommended Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli and Check Please by Ngozi Ukazi. This year, I'm recommending Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez. Is anyone really surprised that this book is getting mentioned somewhere in this video? So, the story follows Darcy, who for the past few years has been running an anonymous relationship advice business out of a locker at her high school. But when one of her classmates, a boy named Browham, catches her in the act, he kind of maybe sort of blackmails her into becoming his personal relationship advice coach and helping him win back his ex-girlfriend. I love this book so much. It's honestly probably my favorite YA contemporary novel of ever. And it's just one of the most casually queer stories that I have ever had the pleasure of reading. Darcy, the main character, is bisexual, and she's a member of her school's Gender and Sexuality Alliance, which means that she's surrounded by other queer characters, including her best friend and her older sister. So although I do consider this book sapphic, I do have to say that it does not feature a female-female relationship. The love interest is male. That's the fun thing about bisexuality. 2 or more genders, baby. And because of this, the book gets to address the best that I've ever seen it addressed both biphobia and internalized biphobia. Throughout the book, Darcy is experiencing this anxiety around the idea of being in a romantic relationship with a guy because that's perceived as the opposite gender and as like a straight relationship. And so despite the fact that she very confidently identifies as bisexual and has on-page feelings for a girl, she still worries that her feelings for the guy somehow invalidate her queerness. And there's just a wonderful, beautiful scene in which that gets discussed openly amongst the characters that makes me cry, just tears of joy every single time I read it. It's just like the ultimate comfort book and comfort scene for me. There's also a very cute sequence that takes place at Disneyland that makes my heart melt a little bit, and basically this book wasn't written for me consciously, but it feels like it was written for me. Next up, we have Green representing nature. Pick a book that is out of this world. Previously, I recommended Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon, and The Never Tilting World by Rin Chupeco. This year, I'm recommending Sweet and Bitter Magic by Adrienne Tooley. When a magical plague sweeps across the kingdom and infects her beloved father, Rin makes a deal with the local witch Tamsin. Tamsin is arguably the most powerful witch of her generation, but she's been exiled by the ruling coven and cursed with the inability to feel love without stealing it from another. So, if she helps catch the witch who created the plague, Rin will give her her love for her father. In order to navigate a world being torn apart by dark magic and the consequences of their own complicated pasts, the two have to learn to work together. And as they get closer to reaching their goal, they find themselves leaning on each other in unexpected ways. This is one of the most beautifully written fantasy novels I think I've ever read, on a prose level and on an emotional level. The prose can be soft one moment and deadly sharp the next in a way that really emphasizes just the differences between these two girls and the ways that the world has treated them and the ways that they view the world because of that. Watching their relationship develop as they learn to interact with each other and then learn to really rely on each other was just beautiful. Their relationship lives in this gray area surrounding enemies to lovers, in which they definitely both always have the same goal, but not the same moral compass, which just makes for gorgeous, gorgeous chemistry and such wonderfully deep emotions. It honestly made me think very deeply about the meaning of love, which is either totally unexpected or completely expected when one of the characters can't feel that at all. Next, we have Blue representing peace. Pick a book where one of the main characters deals with a difficult truth. Previously, I've recommended They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman, and You Should See Me in a Crown by Leah Johnson. This year, I'm recommending She Drives Me Crazy by Kelly Quinlan. What's worse than getting in a fender bender with your stuck-up cheerleader nemesis? Being forced to carpool until her car is fixed because your meddling mother's got involved in the situation. Scotty Zajac and Irene Goodman do not get along, even when they're not being forced to share a tiny car together, but when their perceived proximity makes Scotty's ex jealous, she ropes Irene into a fake dating scheme. And as we all know, fake dating often leads to real feelings. The catch here is that both Scotty and Irene are still sort of reeling from previous toxic relationships. There are so many things to love about this book. It's one that really made me feel incredibly nostalgic for high school, which is weird because the two characters are a basketball player and a cheerleader, and I had basically nothing to do with either of those things. It just had that high school nostalgia feeling coming off of it in like huge waves. It's also set in a town that's like weirdly into Christmas in a way that I am weirdly into. Basically, it's perfectly cheesy and I love it very much, but also it explores the fallout of toxic relationships so well, and it's one of the first times I've actually seen that directly addressed in young adult fiction, or even just in fiction, especially in terms of sapphic relationships. So I often joke about how flirting with girls is scary because nobody taught me how, but the fact that nobody bothers to teach young adults how to navigate same-sex relationships is actually like legitimately terrifying, because it means that nobody teaches us how to protect ourselves from an abusive relationship, whether that be how to spot the red flags beforehand or how to get out of one safely. And unfortunately, romantic and domestic relationships between women specifically are often overlooked when it comes to studies and discussions of intimate partner violence, abuse, etc. Another book that I love that goes into the same subject very deeply is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. 10 out of 10 would recommend. When it comes to She Drives Me Crazy, Scotty is at a point in her life where she really lost herself in her previous relationship and is absolutely reeling in the aftermath. Accepting that fact is not going to be easy for her, and I love to see that in a YA book, because I love when authors don't hold back on issues like this, because they absolutely do affect teens. We like to think that we've protected the children, but I had multiple friends in high school who went through some form of abusive relationship, and going through that and getting out of that and then recovering from that are all traumatic experiences that have really affected those people. A lot of that harm could have been avoided if anyone had really taught them what to look out for. This is true of any relationship regardless of the gender makeup. We don't teach teens how to take care of themselves in that regard. And having books like this out there, accessible and available, is a great first step toward that, right? Like, at least if, you know, their teachers have failed them and their parents have failed them, this story won't. Don't get me wrong, this book is so adorable that when I read it, my heart exploded into like 1,000 little confetti pieces of happiness. But it also is just a very real and deep exploration of these complicated situations and emotions. So, like, get you a book that can do both. Last but certainly not least, we have Purple representing Spirit. Pick a book that deals with LGBT+ and religious themes. Previously, I recommended I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver, and We Set the Dark on Fire by Taylor K. Mejia. This year, I'm recommending The Henna Wars by Adiba Jaigirdar. The Henna Wars follows Nishat, a Bengali Muslim girl who attends an all-girls Catholic school in Dublin, Ireland. When a competition in her business class challenges students to run their own small businesses, Nishat is excited for the chance to show off her henna skills she's been carefully cultivating and introduce her classmates to some of her culture. But she's not the only one with the idea. Her beautiful, charismatic classmate Flavia is also setting up a henna booth. This leaves Nishat incredibly conflicted because, despite the fact that Flavia is appropriating her culture in the name of art, she can't quite shake the growing feelings she has for her. This book explores the complicated relationship between Muslim faith and queerness, specifically through Nishat's relationship with her parents. Her mother, in particular, is very concerned with how her daughter's sexuality is going to be viewed by their community, because as immigrants, they've really relied on this community as a lifeline and a connection back to the culture that they left behind. So Nishat's kind of risking being separated from what her mother sees as something very vital. And it's not that Nishat doesn't have a respect for or a love for or a desire to be included in this community, she just wants to be able to do that and be herself, but she's being told that you can't be Muslim and gay. One of my favorite quotes from the novel actually reads, "Of course Muslims can be gay. How can anyone think otherwise? The two aren't mutually exclusive. I am living, breathing proof." And Nishat's struggle to stay true to herself, her family, and her culture is what makes her such a compelling character. Alright, there you have it. That's the Pride Flag Book Tag Take 4. I can't believe that I've been doing this for 4 years. I always forget to celebrate my channel birthday, but every time June comes around and I do this video, I'm like, oh my gosh. My channel's like 4 years old now. It's 4 years of my life spent on BookTube, and even more than that in the book community. And this is the first year doing this video that I truly felt torn about the decisions that I was making to answer the prompts, because I'd read so many wonderful queer books in the past year that I was not sure which ones to put in the video. I ended up going with the ones that meant the most to me personally, but I have so many other queer books I cannot wait to recommend to you, and even though Pride Month is already over, I think I'm gonna do another LGBT plus Rex video like in the next few weeks. So if you want to keep an eye out for that and any other upcoming videos from yours truly, remember to click that subscribe button. With that being said, my name is Evelyn. I make new videos every Magical Monday, and I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.